ahead and let's go ahead and
Yeah.
get started. I want to start by saying good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us today on this webinar supporting practical strategies for supporting student mental health and resilience. I really want to thank you again for taking the time to join us for this important and very timely discussion. My name is Mike Yantes. I'm a program director with WhyTry, and I'm going to be the host today for this webinar. And we are pleased to have a very special guest with us, someone who's dedicated his life to helping young people overcome challenges and build resilience in the face of adversity. Joining us is Christian Moore. Christian is a leading expert in resilience. He is a licensed clinical social worker. He is the a sought after keynote speaker, and he's the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Resilience Breakthrough. Christian is also the founder of the WhyTry program, which is really a groundbreaking way to equip educators, counselors, social workers, administrators with the tools they need to easily help students build the skills that they need to increase resilience and face the challenges that we see. And there's so many challenges that we see in schools today. As I get a chance to talk with schools across the country, I see and I hear a lot of themes that relate to student engagement, student mental health, the many challenges that we see in our communities that students need to face. So Christian's going to share today some valuable insights, some strategies, and some actionable steps to help us better support the mental health and well-being of the students in our communities and within our schools. So welcome, Christian. We appreciate you. Thank you for being here today.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm excited to be here.
All right. So Christian, like I said, you've dedicated your career to understanding and teaching resiliency. You've impacted countless numbers of educators and students. Your programs are in all 50 states and over 30,000 schools. And I just want to start off by asking you, what prompted you to get into this field?
Yeah. I'm sure a few people out there know my journey, my life story a little bit. Those that don't know, I grew up, I was a special education student. I was illiterate when I was 17 years old. Um, Both my parents had pretty severe mental health issues. I had a dad with autism, a mom with social phobia, afraid to leave the house. So, I was a street kid growing up. I grew up outside of Baltimore, about 15 miles outside of Baltimore, and just had a few challenges growing up, and just really didn't have a lot of hope. I didn't even think I'd get out of my neighborhood. It's crazy today. I've had the opportunity to go 7 million miles across the planet. And I literally thought I was stuck in my neighborhood for the rest of my life. My friends had cars, and it was kind of difficult situation. And so um, it's interesting. I wrote this book, The Resilience Breakthrough. I just found out recently, over 100,000 copies sold. And that resilience, like I've studied resilience from an academic standpoint, but I always like to point out to people that resilience was delivered to me on a silver platter. I had no choice but to become resilient. There wasn't an option. It was either resilience or, I'm gonna spend the rest of my life, locked up. It's interesting. I was in special education, and a couple years ago, I went back to Maryland, the school district I grew up in, and almost all the kids that were sitting in the back of the room with me in special ed had spent time being incarcerated. So I think the other thing that really inspired me is just the debt I have to, seeing what happened to my friends in special education. I did my thesis in graduate school on the impact that learning disabilities has on, poverty and crime. I learned that over 70% of youth in our youth correction system have a learning difference. Now, there's many reasons a child's locked up besides a learning disability. It was like a pie. One slice of that pie is, a lot of times 70% of the time they have a learning difference. Over 80% of the adult prison population has a learning difference. And so that just got me really interested in resilience, and could I deliver resilience to kids, whether they have a conduct disorder or a learning disability background like myself. Could I get resilience to them? And that kind of became my life's work. All the social workers, and I know psychologists listening to me know there's a lot of research that came out of Hawaii, that Hawaii Resiliency Project, where they found that one of the biggest X factors in people's lives is this ability to bounce back, this ability to be resilient. When they did a 20-year longitudinal study, and they found that resilience was one of the biggest X factors. And so I want to start out by kind of sharing my resilience journey for a few people out there that don't know my story. Verbally, for years, I would verbally tell my story over and over. And one day, when my therapist said to me, "Hey, Christian, you kind of tell your trauma over and over for almost 30 years. You might want to put that in a video." And so here's my story of resilience. And I'm going to walk you through a model of resilience today. And one of the first steps of that model I want to point out is, people always say to me, "What's the number one thing a person has to have to be resilient?" And I'll say, look, the key ingredient to resilience usually shocks people. My last speech I ever give, I'm going to just do a mic drop after I say this and walk out. It's going to be a 2-second speech. I'm going to say the key ingredient to resilience is suffering, because until suffering shows up, resilience has never ever showed up. You have to have something to bounce back from. So actually, the suffering, the pain, the opposition is the key to the resilience. It's the most important X factor. So you can see, I know my social work friends out there know exactly what I'm doing. I'm helping them understand how to take the reality of their situation, how to take that difficulty, that trauma, that pain, and use it as a fuel source. So let me show you. Let me pull this up right here. So here's my story. So this is my you'll see my suffering journey here a little bit here, which we all have. We all have that journey. This is a quick picture. We show that in the last basically 2 years, my house flooded. I tore my knee ligament. I severely burnt my hand on a grill and was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. My blood sugar was extremely high, over 730. At 400, you're supposed to be in a coma. I haven't been on insulin for 2.5 years. I have the diabetes in check, which I'm very proud of. But never write a book on resilience. If you write a book on resilience, you're going to deal with some suffering. I had a pretty good life until I wrote a book on resilience. Never write a book on resilience. The universe will be like, all right, we'll see how resilient you are. Mike's laughing. He knows that's true. All right, here we go. Here's my story. I grew up in between Baltimore and DC in a family of 12 kids, 5 brothers, 6 sisters. Both my parents had some mental health challenges. My mom had social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder, had a fear of leaving the house. You have to leave the house to go get food. So there wasn't a lot of food to eat sometimes in my house growing up. Don't tell anyone, but my dad was one of the highest level code breakers at the National Security Agency. You could give my dad any mathematical problem and he could instantly rattle it off the top of his head. My dad was autistic. He was a genius, but he had very little common sense or social skills. If you've ever seen that movie, A Beautiful Mind, you've met my dad. So having 2 parents with some mental health challenges put me in a situation where I ended up being a street kid. I could hang out till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on a school night, had very few rules, very few boundaries. One night, I was out late at night and a car pulls up and I hear a voice. And the voice I hear is the voice of a woman who I endearingly call Mama Jackson. It was one of my best friend's moms who sees me out there, late at night.
Christian had so many obstacles that was going on in his home.
She knows what I'm out there doing, and she says, look, don't you ever set foot on our property. I'm gonna call the school tomorrow. I'm gonna make sure you're not in any of Sean's classes. I remember thinking to myself, dang, I know I'm bad, but I'm not that bad. I can never go to school with him ever again.
When you see a child that's hungry, there's no happiness there. You're thinking about what other kids have.
Going to school was very difficult for me. As a child, I was diagnosed with ADHD, conduct disorder, and severe learning disabilities. When I was sitting in a classroom, oftentimes, I was embarrassed. When I got called out loud, I would act up and get in trouble instead of embarrassing myself because I didn't know how to read or didn't know how to do basic math. So, for me, it was like going to the doctor's office every day, going to school. I had a hard time telling time. When I was even 17 years old, I couldn't tell time on a hand clock. To me, 4:45 equals 25 minutes to 5, but they tell me 1/4's 15.
When we concentrate on that more to make sure that a child's needs are provided for, then that child will thrive. I know that I'm loved, and I know that this person is going to feed me.
Mama Jackson took over and said, look, if you start going to school every day, I want to see your report cards. If you start answering to me, you can come eat in our house anytime you want. Now, Mama Jackson was a seriously, seriously good cook. That's one of the reasons why I'm in top physical condition right now. But anyways, I was very blessed to have Mama Jackson come into my life. It was kind of an informal foster care situation. She took over and really started giving me skills of resilience, had a huge impact on my life. And I'm excited to share with you all the different skills and strategies that Mama Jackson gave me to help me become resilient.
One of his teachers in high school said to him that he would never go to college. Christian went to college.
Growing up in between DC and Baltimore, I saw many social problems in my community, in my neighborhood. You know, I saw poverty, I saw hopelessness at times. I even saw some violence. But I remember walking to school one morning and literally seeing one of my best friends evicted from his house. His furniture was all throughout his front yard. I could see the heartbreak in his eyes, his parents' eyes. And I knew in that moment, I wanted to be a social worker. And I knew I could not become a social worker unless I went to college. You know, but I was told college was probably not going to be an option for me with a 6th grade math level, a 7th grade reading and writing level. You know, statistically, I had a better chance of playing the NBA and becoming LeBron James.
His experience was at the other side of the track. Life was different. Life was unique. And the kids like that, they have to survive.
I struggled getting through college math. You know, college math is a requirement to make it through school. I remember that feeling in my stomach when I knew I couldn't graduate.
They're not going to let me graduate because I can't do math. I can't count money, I can't numbers, I get confused and all of these things. He was like a bobcat in a cage.
So I came up with something called the No F game plan. And this was a strategy that I used to make it through school with my learning differences.
He made himself big. He made himself known to others. I'm here. Hey, I may not have what you have, but I have a street smart.
I would go to every class. I would sit on the front row. I would do all the homework assignments. And I would do enough extra credit to get a D-. I would shoot for A's, but I learned in college you get just as much credit with a D-.
And his paper is not polished. Other students get an A. Christian gets B, sometimes a C.
Mike, what's wrong with the C?
He has ideas. He has a substance. And the WhyTry program that he ran with and helped incredible number of students and the teachers and administrators came out of a classwork.
He created an environment to teach teachers how to really deal with students that may have significant functional limitations.
I persevered. Luckily, I knew what resilience was. I knew how to take my academic challenges and use them as a reason to knock down barriers, to focus on what was right with me, not what was wrong with me.
The vision of WhyTry, and I think this thing is called the roller coaster ride. And I'm so glad that when he fell off of that roller coaster, that he got back on.
Dr. Virgil Wood, civil rights icon and close friend to Dr. Martin Luther King, learned about WhyTry's impact and decided to honor Mama Jackson with the National Rosa Parks Save the Children Award. Mama Jackson gave me a safe and loving environment so I could thrive. She didn't get rid of my problems at home, at school, in my neighborhood. She showed me how to use those problems as a fuel source to put one foot in front of another and create a productive outcome with the opposition. Despite my many challenges, I was able to get a master's degree with a 6th grade math level and a 7th grade reading and writing level and become a licensed clinical social worker.
I'm gonna cut that a little short because of time there. But as you can see,
I've been very blessed. I had incredible mentors, incredible people, reached out, opened up doors for me. So again, you guys, I have a huge debt to pay. And that day Mama Jackson got the National Rosa Parks Award. That was an amazing day. It's interesting. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to work, with over 3 million students, working over 30,000 schools without Mama Jackson, impacting one person. That's the power of just investing in that one. I know I'm talking to educators. You all know that like the back of your hand. And so, yeah, that's why the work everybody is doing right now, I believe it's the most important work on the planet. Education was my way out of poverty. Education is how I was able to go 7 million miles and be able to have this incredible life. It was through education. And that's why this is the most important work on the planet. It's once you have knowledge, nobody can take knowledge from you. They can take a lot of things from you, but they cannot take your knowledge from you. All right. So a professor comes to me, Dr. Seipel, who you saw in the video. He is one of the leading experts in poverty in the country. He's out of Cornell University. And he says to me, look, Christian, do me a favor, just write down for me on a piece of paper, how did you make it this far in school with your background, with your learning differences? So I wrote down a few principles on a piece of paper. I wrote down, I had realized my decisions had consequences. This is that roller coaster ride that Mama Jackson, she's my whole life, she saw me on this roller coaster going up and down, crashing. The loop represents the problems you keep having over and over. I'd be in that loop. I'd be up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning running the streets. I would my head would hit the pillow, and my head would hit that pillow, and I'd feel frustrated, confused, angry. I felt like giving up. The next morning there'd be a knock at my door, and Mama Jackson would come up to my bedroom, pull me out of my bed, throw me in the back of her car, and take me to school. And so again, I was very blessed to have her believe in me. So that's that roller coaster ride right there. It just represents the ups and downs of life. Our decisions have consequences. So to get on that track to opportunity, freedom, self-respect, that middle track there, I had to tear off my labels. I had all these labels right here growing up: failure, druggie, learning disabled, dumb, lazy, rebellious, attitude problem. So we partnership with kids and tearing off their labels. We'll take a can. Actually, I have a can here. One of my trainers was just here training. And so the can's here. We'll take a can. One of the physical activities we'll take a can of, what is this? This is tomatoes. I usually do lima beans because you can throw them away. And inside the can, we'll fill them up with Starburst. We have a clean edge can opener. And then we'll have the students. What I usually do is put a blank label on the outside of the can. On one side of the can, I'll have the students put their strengths. I'll have them put their negative labels on the other side. Then we'll have them rip them off, and then they open up the can. Then inside the can is the Starburst. And I'll say the Starburst represent their real you. So they physically experience something, they visually see it, and then we reinforce it with music. We have all different genres, styles of music. So the child visually sees it, they hear it in music, and then they physically do something. And that's basically the WhyTry program. WhyTry is skills of resilience. And then I'm just going to do this for about a minute, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the time on our resilience work. But I know several people out there have maybe not seen WhyTry, so I just want to give you a quick overview. So again, in my own life, I had to tear off my labels. I had to learn how to control my defense mechanisms. When I was in school, the teacher would say, Christian, turn to page 130 and read out loud. I didn't know how to read, so I'd swear at the teacher or punch the kid next to me, because I'd much rather be sent to the principal's office for acting out behaviorally than 30 kids laughing at me because I don't know how to read. Today I realize, why was I acting out that intense? I really had no control over my defense mechanisms. This is a simple, what I call a motivation formula. I look at life's problems being like water. Water can flood and do damage, or water can be channeled through dams and create electricity. We have to drink enough water to stay alive. But again, too much water. As I've traveled across America, I've seen what happens in a flood. It's unbelievable, the damage that it can do. But again, water also keeps us alive. And so with this metaphor here, I want kids to see that they have the ability to channel whatever their challenge is through these 4 dams. And the first one is focus their self-talk on what they have control over. They've got to tap into character and heart. You go through the motions, you don't give up, out of respect for people who love and care about you. For me, it was Mama Jackson, my wife Wendy, I've been married to for 34 years. A passion, purpose, or interest. And then you get plugged into a support system. Whatever your passion, purpose, or interest is. My passion is to help students. Mike is a support system to me. That fourth dam there, because me and Mike have the same passion, purpose, and interest in our lives. So we've been able to connect as friends. So your passion, purpose, or interest will almost always lead to that connection. Um, is a tribute to my home state of Maryland. You put a bunch of live crabs in a pot. If you don't put a lid on the pot, why can't the crabs get out of the pot? The kids will say, well, Dad, the other crabs are reaching up and pulling them down. So I'll say, hey, your friends you're skipping school with, you're fighting with, doing drugs with, all they're doing is they're pulling you down. They're keeping you in the pot. You know, misery loves company. Then every question that the teacher or the counselor asks the student is written around the visual metaphor. And to be really frank with you guys, because of time, we're just doing this really quick. You know, we put over 3 million students through these 10 visual metaphors. We've never had a child go, I don't understand this picture. You know, being someone with learning disabilities, I hate complexity. If something's complex, I get frustrated. So I think probably one of the reasons I've been able to do this for 30 years is I took the most complicated things in mental health and simplified them. And I think when we work with children, we need to get more simple and make sure they understand, especially if we're dealing with, you know, their mental health and their social and emotional skills and all that stuff. It's so important that we put it in a language that they can really connect with. Um, this is a simple problem solving model. We have them write in whatever problem they're dealing with, and then they have to identify the problem, create options, get help, take action, believe in change, jump back up. This is a maze. It takes them 20 minutes to get through this maze. I'll say to get through this maze, you had to have the desire to do it. You had to put the time, you have to put the effort in. It's hard work is the X factor. You have to lift society's laws and rules. Mike's laughing. I'm going through this so fast, but but just want to give you a quick overview. Then they got to get plugged into a support system. We want them to get plugged into at least 3 of these. The only good thing I know that came from COVID is we just did a worldwide study on what happens when people are in isolation. We saw mental health issues go through the roof. Human beings are social creatures. We have to have at least 2 to 3 support systems or we're in major trouble. We know that is very correlated with mental health. That debate is over. So that's one good thing that came, maybe the only good thing that came from COVID is that you know, we know support systems, relationships are the X factor. You know, for years people would say, well, that's just coming from a bleeding heart social worker when I would talk about relationships, but that's not that debate is done. And then the last picture sums it up. When we first work with students, they're usually standing, many of these kids are standing next to this wall right here. They're dealing with failure, drugs, anger, fighting, different academic, social problems, family issues. But our goal is they learn how to stop crashing, tear off their labels, and so on. So be frank with you, how we got this in over 30,000 schools is we would just say to the school administrators, look at the students' GPA and test scores before they go through these skills and after they go through these skills. And be frank with you, that's been our business model for almost 30 years. If it works, do more of it. If it doesn't work, we should be fired anyhow, right? And so I guess being someone with severe learning disabilities, you know, the average income for kids with my background with moderate severe learning disabilities is, you know, like 12 to $15,000 a year is the average income. And so for me, I wasn't afraid to kind of stick my neck out and say, hey, look, if this works, do more of it. If it doesn't work, fire me. If I make $30,000 a year, I was rich. Does that make sense? I never thought I could make $30,000 a year with my background. And so that probably opened up some doors where I was able to maneuver in some ways to advocate for kids. I think that opened up a lot of doors, was able to take some of the economics off the table and say, hey, let's do what's in the best interest of these children. And I was kind of in a unique position to do that because my background. So a long story short, again, we create those 10 visual metaphors, and those are skills of resilience. Mike, what are you want any comment there, Mike, on why try
No,
the skills of resilience?
thank you. Just and I think like a comment even you made at the beginning as I'm looking at the 10 skills of resilience, we're really focusing on those skills. You've done the hard work of pulling in what do we need to focus on if we really want to see kids grow and be able to handle resilience, adversity, and challenges. It's skills like decision making, problem solving, all those 10 areas you went through, the self-efficacy, motivation, valuing hard work, building real connections. How many students do we work with that feel they have connections, but as you start talking to them, they're not real connections, right? They're just maybe connections through social media or other internet sites. And the other message I'm taking from you is that what we're doing is taking the best things we know about how kids learn and how therapy works and putting them together in a visual format. Kids are visual learners, like you said, and we're doing it in a way that is going to incorporate a multi-learner approach with multi-sensory approach in incorporating music, books, journals, videos in kind of that flexible way that's relevant. And I love that you talked about the power of relationships. I don't care if you're teaching math, English, or science, right? Christian, with WhyTry, what you're doing is you're making sure you have that relationship as you're building those skills. So I want to shift just a little bit because I know I've had a chance to hear you speak many times to large audiences, and I watch the people come up to you afterwards. And one of the consistent things that I think people want to know about is it's great to learn about what skills they can focus on, and but really that question of where does the resilience actually come from? Where does the resilience come from to actually apply those skills? And I know that's something that you wrote about in your book, and I'm just wondering if you'd share a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, we spent, I guess at the time, probably about, 25, 26 years teaching specific skills, hard work, determination, skills of resilience. And again, what Mike was saying, a lot of educators just would say, hey, Christian, we've used your WhyTry program for the last 10 years. We get it. Kids understand the visual metaphor, the music, the physical activities. We love your program. But why is one student motivated to stop crashing and another student's not motivated to stop crashing or to tear off their labels? That's the toughest question. And I know Mike has seen me try to answer that question. It's really difficult question to answer. To be frank with you, for years, I would just say, and all the social workers will laugh when as soon as I say this, they'll know. Because I said this for years, all you can do is teach kids life skills. The inner motivation has to come from within because what works with one person doesn't work with another person. It's a soft science. I know the mental health workers out there know exactly what I'm talking about. I had a perfect answer for it. I would say that because it's somewhat true. I mean, I can't hand someone the seeds of resilience or motivation, right? I mean, I'm not Anthony Robbins. I don't know. I can't just hand someone resilience. But what's interesting is one day this little old lady kind of comes to this little Polynesian lady came up to me who'd been in education for like 35 years. And she heard me answer that question several times like that. And she said, Christian, why don't you're not even thinking when they ask you that question, you're not even trying to answer it. Why don't you stop and think about where does resilience come from? And I was doing work from Detroit to Baltimore to Chicago to LA Unified. And I kept meeting these kids who had high trauma. Mom's in prison, dad's an alcoholic, their older brother abused them. They have every reason to drop out of school. And I kept meeting thousands of these kids that made my childhood look like Disneyland. And these kids were getting like scholarships, to John Hopkins, to the University of Maryland, to Georgetown. I remember meeting these kids in Baltimore, and I'm like, wow, you are overcoming some serious trauma. And I started realizing social workers like me, we're not really studying that population. 90% of the people who come to me for therapy or into counseling is because they have high trauma. They're hurting themselves and others, right? That's mainly the population I've worked with over the years. And I started thinking, this is interesting. Nobody's really paying attention to people with tremendously high trauma that are thriving. And that's what I ended up writing my book about, is because I wanted to know what the heck are they tapping into? And I kept seeing four things pop up over and over. And now we've looked at really tens of thousands of these kids. We've never seen these four things not be a part of it. Something called relational resilience, street resilience, resource resilience, and rock bottom resilience, which I'll talk about all of those here in the next few minutes. But I want to walk you through a model of resilience where resilience comes from internally. And I'll tell you, over the last 20 years, if I went to any workshop and someone said they're about to tell me where inner resilience comes from or inner motivation comes from, I would have turned on every recording device and sprinted to the front of the room to hear someone answer that question. The reason I set that up is I teach this to thousands of people, right? Every week, sometimes, and people say to me, "Man, when you taught me that, I wish you would have told me what you're about to teach me." Because I'll get an email or a call a couple of weeks later, and they're like, "All right, that was kind of important. It's so important that we can hand kids, resilience." If someone told me there's a prescription for resilience, I would never have believed it in a million years. But I promise you, I'm going to show you a prescription for resilience that you can literally hand to a child. We're doing this, we're showing third graders by the time they're in third grade how to create a productive outcome with their negative emotions. And this is kind of what this first picture I'm going to show you in my model. So I just want to walk you through the model because I want to leave you with real tools in this workshop because I know you guys are taking time out of your schedule to be here. So I want to give you something really real. And I'm going to be really frank with you guys. I'm going to give to you right now. You get it for free. People pay a lot of money for this. This is and I told Mike, I'm going to give it to him. I'm just going to give it away. So this is what we're going to do here. We're going to get real. All right. So the first thing you have to be resilient is you have to have suffering. The second thing, because you have to have something to bounce back from. The second thing you have to be resilient is you have to flip the switch. It's like this gas pump to access this fuel source. You have to flip the switch. And in resilience, flipping the switch, step number 2 is saying to yourself, how do I use this suffering, this opposition, this difficulty as a fuel source? Or how do I use it as my best friend? How do I use it as a reason to turn in my homework, to stay in school, to walk away from the gang, the fight, to not disrespect that teacher? So it's the ability to say to yourself, so the gateway to resilience is a question. How do I use my parents' divorce? The family car broke down. We don't have a car right now. How do I use the kid bullying me in school as a reason to turn in my homework, to stay in school, to not give up? That's called flipping the switch. You have to flip the switch. The minute you flip that switch, resilience goes into play. Resilience does not start up until you flip that switch. And that's that question. How do I use the opposition as a fuel source? And then the third thing we want them to do is maximize both their positive and negative emotions. That's what the start of this picture right here is. Um, when I started traveling, I went most of my life into my 20s not reading any books. And then after I learned how to read and had a lot of time, and when you go 7 million miles across the planet, you have a lot of time to read. So I started reading hundreds of biographies. I would, oftentimes listen to them too. But I would highlight the minute a person started to change. Now, I spent 8 years in college, $65,000 being taught positive psychology. I believe positive psychology is 50% of the equation. You go get a master's degree in any type of counseling, they're going to emphasize positive psychology. What I realized was, again, that's 50% of the equation. But when I started reading hundreds of biographies, when people started overcoming and changing things in their lives, there wasn't a lot of positive self-talk. I noticed they were taking negative emotions. They were taking depression, guilt, anger, loneliness, fear, anxiety, regret, and they were using that as a fuel source. I remember the first book I read that I came across, and I think there's a biography coming out, I think this weekend, about Christopher Reeve's story. Everybody knows the story of Christopher Reeves, played Superman. He was the opposite of me, tall, dark, handsome, and talented. And everybody knows the story. He gets thrown off the horse. He's paralyzed. And again, they're doing like a, a whole series on his story, starting here this weekend, which I'm excited about. I've been talking about him for 20 years, and wow, people finally they're going to introduce Christopher Reeves to the next generation. But what's amazing about him is, he wanted to give up. He wanted to shut down because he's this incredible actor, mountain climber, Renaissance guy. And let me see if I have his picture here. I think I do. Oh, there he is. There's old Christopher Reeves. Got the little curl. Hey, as bald as I'm getting, Mike, I need that curl right there. I'm hurting, bro. But so Christopher Reeves, everybody knows the story. He's paralyzed. He says to his wife, "I want to give up. I can't fight on." And she just tries to keep Christopher alive to get him to not commit suicide. She says, "Just hang in there for me, for the kids. Let's see if you can make a difference to the paralysis community." And everybody knows the story. He makes a huge difference to the paralysis community. He gets in that pool, starts taking his anger, his hurt, and starts rehabbing at a high level, is able to walk a little bit. And that inspires an incredible number of people, and lots of other people were influenced by that and help put some of the paralysis, they were able to make huge progress in that world. And but what fascinated me, it was he was maximizing his negative emotions. Nelson Mandela did the same thing in the prison camp for 27 years. And I started looking at that going, wow, Malala, shot by the Taliban, just got the Nobel Peace Prize like 2 years ago. Millions of young women around the world are getting an education, because she said, until the man who shot me, until his daughter can receive an education, I'm going to speak out. And again, everybody knows that history, but she did that with her anger, her sadness. And so I started thinking, man, who are highly resilient oftentimes are maximizing their negative emotions just as much or more than their positive emotions. To say that shocked me was an understatement. And then I looked at my own life. People say to me, man, what motivated you to go 7 million miles around the planet? I don't care what they're paying you. That's a huge sacrifice. There were some years, a couple years, I was on the road 260 days a year. That was my longest, craziest year. 260, that's 260 meals times three in a restaurant. That's probably why I have diabetes, Mike. But that's a lot of eating out. So I've actually eaten out in the last 30 years, more meals in a restaurant than in a home. And so don't recommend you do that. You end up like me. So anyways, I started realizing that one of the most, it's one thing to tell a child, hey, I want you to maximize your negative emotions, but how do I put it in a language they can understand? And this is where I started using the metaphor here. Let me go back here of I started using the metaphor of a car battery. And I would say to the student, can you charge a battery with just a positive connection? The kid would say, no, the battery does not charge with just a positive connection. And they look at me like I'm kind of silly right now. And I'll say, can you charge a battery with just a negative connection? They go, no. So they all know the battery charges because the positive and the negative are coming together. Well, if you have suffering, if you have trauma, I don't know about you all, the minute I have trauma in my life, I feel sad, hurt, angry. If someone I love dies, or one of my kids gets hurt, or they're going through a difficulty right now, whatever the challenge that they're dealing with, I'm going to have negative emotions. And what I started realizing is there's no law in the universe that says you cannot use negative emotions in productive ways. For example, if me being here right now talking to you all was dependent upon those emotions on the left, optimism, love, peace, happiness, trust, feeling connected, and acceptance, I wouldn't be here talking to y'all. I didn't have a lot of that growing up. I have reactive attachment disorder. If anybody's ever worked with kids in foster care, because both my parents have mental health issues, it's just really hard for me to attach. Mike will tell you, I trust no human beings on this planet. No, I trust Mike, but there are very few humans because when you grow up, you learn trust and attachment, right, through your parents. And I didn't have that luxury growing up until Mama Jackson showed up in my life. But to be really frank with you guys, the reason why I'm here speaking to you all today, and the reason why I was able to go 7 million miles around this planet is because I have an anxiety disorder. I've never not had anxiety. I don't even know what it's like to be on this planet without anxiety. My mom's anxiety was so high she couldn't leave the house. So now I've gone 7 million miles with anxiety. I can't read maps. Good thing a GPS was created, or I would have been paralyzed. But I have huge anxiety. But I took anxiety, fear, and it's really weird to be a national public speaker with an anxiety disorder, but that was the greatest therapy to work through my anxiety. They say public speaking is the number one fear you can pretty much have. I was like, wow. And so I got major desensitization therapy. And so, but I realized for me to have opportunity, I had to create productive outcomes with pain, guilt, anger, frustration, sadness, regret, loneliness. If you have conduct disorder like me, you are going to deal with guilt because I mess up all the time. The human condition is to mess up, right? And so I started realizing you have twice the fuel source, twice the ability to be resilient if you can maximize both your positive and negative emotions. I've been able to teach this on college campus. I thought, man, this is this theory I came up with. I thought the academic world was going to eat me alive, but it's interesting. I've shared this in many colleges across the country, and it's interesting. The psychology professors, the social work professors go, we should be screaming this. Absolutely. When we look at people who are highly resilient, again, if you have suffering, if you have opposition, you're going to have negative emotions. It's actually what makes you human. If you didn't mess up, make mistakes, have negative emotions, you may as well be AI. You may as well be a machine. What is most special about us as human beings is the fact that we have this gamut. We have 40 to 60,000 different emotions during the day. And some of those emotions are going to be positive, and some of those emotions are going to be negative. And it's interesting. I talk about positive and negative emotions because I'm working with children. When I teach this on college campuses, the psychology professors and stuff always point out to me, Christian, we know you're doing this, you work in education, but if you're talking to adults, please point out to them it's just the human condition. We all have emotions. Usually people with agendas want to make emotions positive or negative, or this is good, this is bad. But the human condition is we just have emotions. We all have emotions all day long, 40 to 60,000. It's as normal as drinking water or breathing. It's literally the human experience. And so we got to stop demonizing negative emotions. They're normal. And it's funny, we teach kids by third grade. The minute they feel sad, nervous, or angry, nothing's wrong with them. I spent half my life thinking if I have anxiety or I feel sad or I made a mistake, that I'm like the worst person in the world. And you have no motivation. One of the biggest motivation killers is to have suffering, to have negative emotions and then beat yourself up with them. Now, of course, if your negative emotions are extreme, my anxiety, I'm on medication to deal with anxiety, right? I have to talk to a counselor sometimes about my anxiety. You need to get access if it's impacting your social, occupational functioning with your negative emotions. You do need to get help. I'm not minimizing that at all. But what's really amazing is when you show people, hey, you have twice the fuel source to be resilient and to bounce back if you can maximize both your positive and negative emotions. And yeah, I was teaching this not too long ago by the University of Iowa. There's a bunch of professors in humanities department there, and they said, Christian, you don't even understand your own battery. I said, what do you mean? They go, do you realize that the greatest music, the greatest plays, the greatest literature is all examples of people taking their negative emotions and creating productive outcomes? And I was like, that's interesting. They said, yeah, have you ever seen the play Les Mis? Or do you know the story of Hemingway? Hemingway fell in love with this nurse. He was hurt during World War I, falls in love with this nurse. He's in kind of rehab for like a year, never sees the nurse again. And they ask him at the end of his life, how did you write like this? And he said, it was heartbreak. I fell in love. I never saw her again. So he channeled all of his emotions into his writing and became Hemingway. Picasso took the War of Spain. He's seen thousands and thousands of his countrymen being killed, and he creates, this abstract artwork that's worth like $1 billion now. And they asked him, why, how did you create this incredible artwork? And Picasso talked about suffering, about pain, and that in seeing his countrymen get killed, the greatest comedians. And then they told me it's actually the number one funeral talk. What we talk about at the end of someone's life is what they did with their negative emotions. So imagine by third grade understanding that you can maximize both your positive and negative emotions. Many adults don't understand how to do that. And again, right now we're teaching tens of thousands of children how to maximize both their positive and negative emotions. And you're actually at a resilience disadvantage if you don't know how to maximize negative emotions, if you don't know how to maximize sadness, hurt, anger. And it's one of the most empowering things is to be able to understand this battery and to maximize. I can't tell you, I've been teaching this now for, I don't know, 7 years. And I've gotten literally hundreds of letters, emails, people going, how did I make it? I've heard from people in their 80s that said they are understanding this for the first time. And I've had 80-year-old people tell me that changed their life. And I've had third graders tell me that's changed their life. And again, we only emphasize positive psychology. And there's $100 billion industry in America just teaching positive psychology. And I think it's important. I think it's 50% of the equation. But if we're going to really help children and families be resilient, we have to show them how to maximize, both set of emotions. All right. So it's one thing to tell a child and a family, hey, we want you to create a productive outcome with your positive and negative emotions. But where's the inner motivation come from to do that? And that's what I want to highlight here for the last 8 minutes here. And I'll turn it back over to Mike. So the first place we want them to do that is with relational resilience. And that just means you go through the motions, you don't give up. Remember, this is the prescription for resilience. This is where resilience comes from internally. You don't give up because people are depending on me. I depend on other people. This is a picture of my two kids, Cooper and Carson, when they were a little younger. If I never got invited to speak again, I would literally go work in 4 fast food restaurants because they need me. I need them. That makes me what? Relationally resilient. It's funny, I said that for years, and then COVID hit. I pretty much went out of business. And so you gotta be careful what you say. Mike's laughing, he knows it's true. And so, but again, I'm not gonna go on shutdown because those two kids right there need me. That gives me my relational resilience. Our greatest power comes from human connection. Here's a picture of Mama Jackson and me when I was young. You can see me in my Washington Commanders coat. We were one game away from the Super Bowl, Mike. I could cry.
Oh no,
One
I thought of
game
you. I watched
away,
that game.
and
Yeah.
we lost. And so it's been since 1991, you guys. I'm a huge Washington Commanders fan. Apologize to get off track. But again, Mama Jackson was that relationship for me. Um, Harriet Tubman, powerful example of relational resilience, freed over 200 slaves on the Underground Railroad. The slaves would want to turn back around, but, they would hear the dogs coming towards them. They would see the lights coming towards them. The real story why they didn't turn around is Harriet Tubman actually had a shotgun with her, and she'd explain to them, if you turn back around, we're all going to get captured. So I'm not going to give you the opportunity to turn back around. And so she freed over 200 slaves. She's also the grandmother of my profession. Jane Addams is the mother of social work, who started the Whole Houses in Chicago, but she created the first retirement homes in Philadelphia for African Americans, elderly African Americans, and did some of the first organized social work. So this is the grandmother of social work. Jane Addams is the mother of social work. But she's a powerful, powerful example of resilience there. Mother Teresa, probably my favorite story in the whole world. She goes and gets the Nobel Peace Prize. And the night before, they have this huge banquet. They're spending literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on the banquet. And Mother Teresa's like, I'm not showing up. And they're like, what? You have to show up. We have presidents, dignitaries, some of the most important people in the world. We're giving you the Nobel Peace Prize. Mother Teresa, you please show up. And she says, nope, I'm not coming. Give me the cash. She finds out how much, and the nicest food on the nicest china. And she says, I'd much rather have the money than to show up. And so they give her the equivalent of the money. She feeds over 300 families for 4 years on the amount of money of an hour and a half banquet. And that's why she's probably considered, Saint Teresa now. And it's just one of my favorite stories. It's funny, as I share this in front of thousands of people, people will say, hey, she wasn't perfect. She messed up. She maybe gave all this money, to the Catholic Church and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's great. But the fact that Mother Teresa maybe messed up, wasn't perfect all the time, she's like me. Does that make sense? So just like that battery, it's the ability to take strengths, weaknesses, whatever your emotions are, and channel them in positive ways. And again, what makes us human is to not be perfect. That's what makes us most special, is the fact that we mess up, we make mistakes. Otherwise, we'd be a robot, a machine. That's why I'm not taking down the Mother Teresa picture. I love it, even though people request that I do. All right. So, Rick and Dick Hoyt ran in over 240 triathlons together. When he became the legs for his son, it completely transformed his life. He said something came from his body to my body that motivated me. When he talked about his son, we know that's relational resilience. So the next place that resilience comes from internally is something called street resilience. And that's where you use any type of judgment, disrespect as fuel to push through and not give up. I was told I couldn't go to college because of my learning disabilities. I had a professor in college that said, Christian, if you can get a college degree, I was his TA. He says, if you can get a college degree, my degree is worth less. I didn't even know how to type on his computer. My wife, Wendy, read all my textbooks to me. She typed up all my papers. Wendy, my wife, actually scored higher on the LCSW exam than I did on the practice exams. Little funny side note. But this professor said, hey, Christian, you got a sixth grade math level, a seventh grade reading and writing level. You should not be on this college campus. That kind of motivated me. And I walked home that day in tears. About 9 years later, I was in the Introduction to School Social Work textbook as evidence-based RTI, PBIS. So he actually has to lecture on my theories now, because I'm in 3 college textbooks. Now, Mike, I know it sounds like I'm bragging, Mike, I apologize. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm telling you that that's street resilience. There will always be haters. There will always be people judging you. Make a difference in this world. Advocate for the poor, the elderly, women, and children, and see if you get attacked. You will get attacked if you advocate for those populations. I don't know why, but that is the world we live in. So there will always be haters. There will always be disrespect. And people who are resilient, I looked at tens of thousands of kids. All of them were pretty much first generation college students. They all said they were told college is not an option. They're not going to be able to do this. All of them use that disrespect. The ability to use disrespect is a fuel source. There will always be people judging you. There will always be people attacking you. The ability to use that as a reason to become more resilient gives you a massive advantage on planet Earth. Rosa Parks refusing to sit on the back of the bus is street resilience. Um, Nelson Mandela, 27 years in that prison camp. He becomes the president of South Africa. The first thing he does is he invites the guy who's seeking the death penalty against him, the prosecuting attorney who seek the death penalty against him. Mandela invites him to his house and says, "Look, here's some nice food." He sits down with him, kind of wines and dines him. He lets him know he cares about the guy. He says, "Look, I understand why you seek the death penalty against me. I messed up. I made mistakes. I learned from those mistakes. I'm going to create reconciliation in South Africa. I'm going to bring people together who do not want to come together. I'm going to have a diverse cabinet. I'm going to have people around me who disagree with me." And he literally said to that guy, "I understand why you seek the death penalty against me." When that man walked out of Mandela's house, the national media was there and they said, "What do you think of Mandela now?" And this is probably why Mandela's funeral was the most viewed funeral in human history. More people paid attention to this man's death than any other human being in this planet. And it's because the guy walked out of Mandela's house. He said to the national media, he just said, "Mandela is the most saintly man I've ever met." That's the power of taking hate, disrespect, judgment, superiority, and say, "I'm going to surrender the one-up relationship. I'm in a powerful position, but instead of using that power to harm, I'm going to surrender it." That is the most powerful thing I've ever seen to change the world. And his ability to do that was unbelievable. And that's why he's Nelson Mandela, but just a powerful, powerful example of street resilience. He used the disrespect and the hate to show more love. He could have got revenge. He could have done all kinds of things. He did the opposite. Um, Abraham Lincoln running for public office 7 times and failing. Cesar Chavez, what he did for migrant farm workers. Gandhi. I could go on and on and on, right? Malala, I've already talked about her. Michael Jordan getting cut from the JV basketball team. If I had time, I'd give you more. Okay. And then I'm going to end with these two real quick and turn it over to Mike. So the third place that resilience comes from within is resource resilience. And that's where you maximize your talents, your abilities, your resources. One of the greatest resources in the world is education. Again, like I said earlier, once you have knowledge, once you have evidence-based data, nobody can take that away from you. Knowledge is one of the most powerful, powerful things in the world. Just being someone who struggled in school and then devoted a life to education, yeah, my education means everything to me. You never need to apologize for having knowledge and being educated. I can use and develop my talents, my personality traits, my network. Those are all resource resilient. You know, um, Helen Keller, she maximized her resources with all of her disabilities. One of my favorite examples is Kyle Maynard, born with no arms, no legs. He wrestled in high school and college. He also recently crawled. He put rubber balls on the end of his stubs and crawled to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. And what I learned from Kyle Maynard is that resilience is not a destination. Resilience takes place in the striving. It's in the effort effect. It's not in like I've never reached resilience, right? Even though I'm the author of one of the biggest resilience books of all time, I have never reached resilience. Everybody catch that? Resilience takes place in showing up when you have every reason to shut down. You just put one foot in front of another. It's not a place you land on or you reach. It's an effort effect. Resilience takes place in the drive, in the push. And Kyle Maynard is a powerful, powerful example of that. Um, and then there's last place resilience comes from is rock bottom resilience. And that's when you're at your lowest point, you believe in your ability to still put that one foot in front of another I was just talking about. To flip that switch, when I hit rock bottom, I flip the switch. I use the pain as fuel. Everybody has a personal rock bottom. If I was your therapist, I'd figure out what the worst moment of your life is, and that would show you how to convert it into your best friend. I've never, ever, me and a whole bunch of therapists that have been working on this model for the last 10 years, we've never seen an issue where we cannot show the person how to use the suffering as a fuel source. I've worked with death row inmates. I've worked in over 200 prisons. So I know for sure firsthand, there's not an issue that you cannot use. I was in Memphis. This is my book, The Resilience Breakthrough. A couple of years ago, I was in Memphis, Tennessee. I was working with a bunch of kids, all had committed murder. And I said to, because they're all going to get out because they're children when they had committed this horrible crime. And I said to them, look, you you guys are going to be considered felons. You're still going to have a hard time getting jobs. I said, you have to use your mistake as a reason to become a more loving father one day, to treat your wives with great respect. You have to take this horrible pain because you guys are all getting out. You have to use this to help society. And over the years, I've heard back from many of these young men that were in that room and they did flip that switch. They became greater human beings. So when I say we can't understand, we cannot figure out a situation where a human being cannot use that pain as a reason to become greater, to work harder, to prove people wrong, to bounce back, to be resilient. So again, resilience is the most powerful thing anybody's ever taught me. I'll end with this picture right here. This is a famous picture during the Great Depression. 6 months after this picture was taken, this is Dorothy Lang photograph. It's my favorite photograph in the world because 6 months after that picture was taken, those kids were still hungry. They were still living in that tent. But look at mom's eyes. That's resilience. That's rock bottom resilience. She is not going on shutdown. She's not giving up. I don't even have words in the English language to describe. But you go back to my model, I can tell you right now, she's dealing with suffering. She's flipping the switch. She did keep those kids alive. She said, I'm going to become a greater human being. I'm going to fight for these kids because of this suffering. She flipped the switch. She tapped into the battery. She maximized her positive and negative emotions. She literally tapped into relational resilience, street resilience, resource, and rock bottom resilience. And I think one of the greatest challenges in the next few years is millions of kids are getting access to evidence-based resilience. I'm personally seeing it. I was just in Uvalde a few weeks ago, and we were teaching resilience in Uvalde. I just got invited to go back and teach these skills of resilience in Uvalde. I'm speaking to all the students in Uvalde where that school shooting was in March. And Mike doesn't even know that. Mike set that up, by the way. When I went and did that, Mike doesn't even know. Yesterday, Mike got invited to go back there, and what I'm going to be teaching them is this message. And if every child in Uvalde, almost every child in Ireland is going through these skills, we're doing this with millions of kids across the country. I need your help. I'm making a plea to you guys. Please help me get these tools to the kids in your community. My kids have access to this information, and it breaks my heart that in 2024, we know where resilience comes from. We know where it comes from internally. We got to make sure all kids get access to it. I'm going to turn the time over to Mike now.
Let me do this. I'm gonna really
Uh,
quick. I know
Yeah,
Christian, you talked about sharing some resources. I know this is a mission for
yeah,
you to get these skills
yeah.
out to people. This QR code that I'm showing on the screen, if you guys hang around just a few more minutes, I know we're just a little bit over, but
Sorry about that. Sorry about
no,
that.
no,
I
Christian,
got
it's
excited. I got
you're
excited,
good,
Mike.
you're good. But Christian had asked me to put this together to share with you some free resources. If you don't, I know a lot of folks listening today actually have access to Christian's programs. If you do, it's great. Love to hear from you. Love to hear how it's going. If you hit this QR code, it's going to just take you to a web page with some of Christian's program lessons that you can just begin using today. So if you don't have access to it, you're still going to get some access to it to be able to use some of those sample lessons. Check it out, work through that reality ride and some of the other resilient stuff. It also has what we haven't touched on today is one of the connections we want to make is with the parents or stakeholders. We have a parent guide to resilience that Christian has put together. It's a great resource. I encourage you to click on it, go through it, explore it, but then share it with the parents in your community. the parents of the kids you're working with, because it really is a great resource for them to start thinking about their own resilience, and gives them great activities and ways to help build resilience within their kids. So it makes that connection, right, between your organization or school and the parents. There's also links to a great library of resources of other leading experts in the country that we've put together with lots of resources in regard to how we support students' mental health and resilience. Now, if you don't have access to Christian's work, my information's on there. Just if you want to learn more, I'd love to learn more about your work, what your needs are, and see if we've got programs that could maybe help. Reach out to me. My phone, that's my cell phone number. You can call it, text it. That's my email. The other thing is, if you would like Christian to share his message with your organization, to share his work with your organization as a speaker, Christian is a very busy keynote speaker, but would love to, I'd love to work with you and the opportunity to see if we can work out to have Christian come and be able to talk with your staff or your kids about resilience. And also, if you are, especially if you're an administrator, or even someone within an organization that has professional development days, WhyTry has a number of options and opportunities. Christian talked about that relationship building, and he's got really that surrendering the one up model that I'd love to show you more about ways that we could develop, that you can quickly build authentic relationships with kids, that helps staff to feel more comfortable in their jobs, improves the culture climate. And so not just understanding why relationships are important, research has shown us that over and over again in education, and even doing any kind of education with kids, but it's how to build those relationships. And so wrapping up with learning the skills of resilience, where resilience comes from, how we can provide professional development. WhyTry can either coming to your school, do it live virtually. We even have a program that can help your leadership team be trained by us, so they can take that message to your staff throughout the school year. We have pre-built, engaging, fun workshops they can do to help your staff understand behavior, how to support kids that are struggling, and how to, more importantly, build those relationships and build a safe environment for kids at school. So anyway, Christian, thank you. I know your insights and comments. I always love hearing you speak, and I know that the group here today has enjoyed it as well. Do you have any closing comments with that? I think Christian and I will stick around if
Yeah,
you
I just
have
want to
questions. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to come. And I know we went a couple minutes over. Apologize about that, but I got a little. Mike knows I get a little excited sometimes. So I wish I was with you guys in person.
Yeah.
Um, we do a bunch of trainings. We do over 300 staff development trainings a year, and I'm telling you, 99% of the people we train give us a 5 on the evaluation. So I promise you, there's no risk. The other thing is, Mike might not like this, but I'm gonna give him away as a consultant. Mike worked for years as an administrator. He was an incredible school social worker. He ran school, worked over counselors, everybody in school system. He's no joke. I personally seen him consult with hundreds of school districts, and he coordinates a lot of stuff for us. But you can pick up the phone and call him and tell him Christian Moore said you're my free consultant today, and you can talk to him about some of the challenges, things you're dealing with in your district. He's much smarter than me. Let me tell you that. So yeah, please reach out to him. He will not let you down. You can just network with him. He's an incredible human being. Feel free to put in what you like, what you didn't like, how we can improve this. We're looking at different ways to get information. If you want to do a similar thing for your district. I know in the next couple of days I'm meeting with several districts where they'll bring together like the director of student services, special ed, guidance. I do a similar thing. If you want to make that happen, just coordinate with Mike. We can do that. Whatever you need, we work for you guys. You're the boss. You tell us what you need. Don't look at the other way around. You're the boss. You tell us who to talk to, what you need. We'll definitely be there for you. And again, yeah, feel free to put it in the chat what you liked, what you didn't like, what you think about my resilience model. Going through those steps there of resilience. Thank you for the heart. So yeah, share that. the book, The Resilience Breakthrough. I promise you, it's not a boring book to read. And so, yeah, I think you'd really enjoy the book. And you know what Mike will do? How many people? We still got a few people on here. If you want a digital copy of the book, I'm gonna give you all a free digital copy of my book. It's funny. I'm not with you, but I like this group for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it's the vibes of the universe, man. I feel like I was in a room with you guys or something. I don't usually give that away, but I'm gonna give everybody a free digital copy of the book. If you reach out to Mike, you have to have a conversation with Mike. You reach out, have a conversation with Mike. I'll give you a free digital copy of the book if you talk to Mike. You can talk to him about his dog. I don't care. You don't even have to talk to him about WhyTry. You don't need to talk about anything. You can just ask Mike, where's his favorite place to eat? And I'll send you a digital copy of the book. All right. But you have to have a conversation with Mike. Oh my gosh, there's the heart. Mike, I should have just said that at the beginning. All right. There y'all got. Y'all got a free copy of the Resilience Breakthrough.
Perfect. I
You
love
just
it.
got to talk to my friend Mike. And hey, you guys are the best. I do request because I know where I'm talking, Florida and North Carolina. I do like that vinegar-based barbecue. I gotta know I might get in trouble in Florida, but North Carolina brings the barbecue. All right, and then there's great food in Florida, best seafood. But how about this? When I come to Florida, you gotta take me to your favorite seafood restaurant. I come to North Carolina, I gotta get my vinegar-based barbecue. And anyways, I'll get therapy for this. But yeah, you guys are the best. Thank you for spending the time. You guys are my heroes, and right now there's no more important time to be an educator. So you guys are in the most important fight in the world. And nothing but respect to everybody in my ear shot, man. Thank you guys for what you're doing for students right now. It's so key. It is so, so important. You guys are my heroes.
Yes, and thank you for all the nice comments. And you are getting some great food options
All
in
right,
the
all right, all
chat.
right. That's it. That's
Take a
it.
look.
That's all about the food.
Yeah, thanks again to everyone. Um, I appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedules. Thank you, Christian. And Mike, you have my information. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me if you want to me to get you. I can get you a very quickly an electronic copy of the book. Just reach out to me. I'll be happy to get that to you. So thank you very much and have a great rest of the day and rest of the week.